Welcome, welcome. Dr. Stephen Hobbs here from the Wealth Movement, sharing some insights, tips about co-creating the well-living workplace, a place of work where you enjoy what you do and do what you enjoy. And there's two words that link to that storyline, and they are movement and profitability. Movement in the sense of moving forward, and profitability, what is it that you gain from? And I'm just going to dive into those two words because I think that there's some extra meanings there that sometimes go beyond what we usually think of the meanings of the words that are particular to the well-living workplace. Now, from a movement perspective, there is this sense of fitness, movement, the physical movement that happens. And we can associate that even with a term like ergonomics, which is about how do you sit, how do you stand in your workplace, and thinking about it from a physical sense. I think most of us would understand that term of movement. There's another one, what it means is to movement is linked to what does it lead to. So the work that you're doing, this co-creating the well-living workplace, it must lead to something. So what is that movement? What does it lead to into the future? Because when you gain that understanding, it's part of the storytelling, story sharing that takes place. Now, another way in which to look at movement is an internal use. It's the program movement. What's happening to be able to maneuver this program, a new program, maybe even a new department, a new project into the workplace from an internal perspective. Now, a lot of times people will use a phrase like culture of safety, culture of accountability. I would like to question that and suggest it's more about the movement of safety, the movement of accountability, because safety and accountability are just aspects of the culture. So it's not like you're trying to create a specific culture of that. I think what you're attempting to do is create a movement. What does it lead to as a program? What is its contribution to the organization? And what are you asking of people? So it's very much like the well-living workplace movement inside the organization. Now, the interesting thing is that there's an external use of the word movement as it pertains to the interactions that you have with societal movements that are around you. So the well-living workplace inside is going to spark interest in elements of society and the wider community that you draw your resources from. I'm thinking of the people part. So there are things that are going on where your business, your organization, your academic department, your government department are operating that you might be able to interact with and influence. I'm thinking ideas like homelessness or diversity and inclusion, just to name a couple. So that's a fourth way of looking at movement, joining the notion of social movements. Now, there's another one which is kind of an interesting one for me, and it deals with management and leadership. And it's about finding a way in which to represent and suggest the motion that you want people to take up. So from a managing point, managing the systems for the people, leading the person from system. So there's a storytelling, story sharing aspect that goes with this movement that you're attempting to encourage, ask people to contribute to. But it comes from a place of managing and leading. And it links back to, obviously, the other four, but it's more connected to the managing and leading itself. So how do you use that managing and leading movement to gain the attention of all the stakeholders? There's a question. And the well-living workplace is attempting to figure out how to move it from all the stakeholders all the way to how to deal with it from an ergonomic point of view in terms of how you sit and stand in the workplace. So that's the 5 ways of looking at movement. Now what I'd like to do is take a look at this world of profitability. Now, I know that most people associate profitability with the idea of finances or financial capital and assets and accounting. And it certainly has an internal, external interface, you know, profit and revenue and liabilities and debits and all that other kind of storyline that goes with it. But there's another way of looking at profitability, which is the profit from the ideas of people. Because that's like an intellectual capital, is that the ideas that are in the workforce, it's something worth taking a look at in what profitability do you associate with those ideas, because they could be the patents, they could be the trademarks in your organization. There's some value there for you. Now, the interesting thing is that there's an experience-based aspect to that in terms of the lived experience of the people, this intellectual aspect. So pay attention to that because something like mentoring taps into that lived experience, that experience that you have, that intellectual capital, so that it can be shared throughout the organization. Now, another way to take a look at this is the whole idea of relationships and how do you profit from the relationships. There's relationships that are going on between people in a department, people between departments, people completely different elements of the organization. Maybe there's one part of the organization in one country, another part in another country. So there's something to be said for this relational profitability and how you might be able to leverage it. And it plays itself out in this human social capital aspect of profitability. So again, I would encourage you to look at that. And one of the sort of the fine-tuned ways is about looking at the relationships in the white space of the organization. It's a fascinating look at what's taking place in the organization when you look at the relationships in that organization of work. There's another way of looking at this from a profitability point of view, and that is this external connections that you have. It's sort of blending the social natural aspect, because there's the connections that you have with other organizations into the community itself. There's profitability there, there's ways to profit, but also the awareness of the impact of the natural capital, the resources, the raw resources that you're drawing into the organization as well. And the well-living workplace is attempting to position an understanding of these four aspects of profitability. But the one that I think sort of catches my imagination, and I have been working on it for many years, is around this notion of workplace culture and the profitability associated with that. If you're working in a culture that would be considered reactive defensive, it's very different than proactive and generative. And therefore, the time, effort, and money, the systems that are cultivated in this reactive defensive way is going to chew up the time, effort, and money that's available to you, versus being able to allocate that time, effort, and money in a proactive, generative way and cultivate the systems and ecosystems from that perspective. So one of the things is to really pay attention to the notion of workplace culture from a profitability point of view. It's not often talked about, and I think it's something of value, and certainly one of the elements that we get into in terms of co-creating the well-living workplace, because it actually blends an internal and external perspective. Now, I'm hoping that by unpacking the word movement in 5 ways, unpacking profitability in 5 ways, offers another way of looking at this notion of what does it lead to, where are you going, the steps that you're taking, and what is you're going to gain from this movement, the profit from this movement in the many ways that are available. So the dynamics of the well-living workplace is quite large. And that in itself is an exciting way of looking at how you organize the work, how you get the organization working with all of the stakeholders. So with that, Take care.